Okay, we're at the airport. Do you need help?
Yes, we just got in a plane crash, and there are a bunch of people who still need help, and there's not enough medics out here that need help. There is a woman out here on the street, on the runway, who is pretty much burned very severely on the head, and we don't know what to do.
That was one of the first 911 calls after the Asiana airliner crash in San Francisco. We now know the pilot at the controls had spent thousands of hours flying Airbus planes, but only about 40 hours flying the Boeing model, the 777, involved in the accident. Wall Street Journal's Andy Pasztor is in California. He's got the latest. Thanks for getting up early, Andy.
Morning to you.
Okay, so significant thing we've learned today, that we know that the pilot didn't have a lot of time in this particular plane. Tell us about the differences between the planes he was used to and the one he was flying.
So about 6 days after the crash, it's increasingly clear that it wasn't any kind of mechanical problem, computer problem. The plane seems to have been operating absolutely as it was designed. And so what the investigators are left with then, of course, is to look at how the pilots were interacting among themselves and what kind of training they had. And the pilot who was flying the aircraft as it was approaching San Francisco, as you said, had almost 10,000 hours in an Airbus A320. He was a check airman in that aircraft, which means he was considered an excellent pilot and taught other pilots to fly the plane, but he was just transitioning over, moving over to this Boeing 777. And I think this accident, more than any in recent years, really raises the issue of how you train, how airlines train pilots to make the switch from one plane to the other, what kind of training is required, and what kind of safety issues are there if the training is not done as it should be.
Andy, there's some interesting specifics here that you report in your story about, and this sounds deep in the weeds, I think it's interesting, auto throttle between an Airbus and a 777. What are the differences? What is auto throttle? What are the differences, and why is that significant here?
And so of course, we don't know the final conclusions of this investigation, so some of this is preliminary, but it looks like investigators are focused on the question of auto throttle, which is a system that keeps the plane's speed and engines at a certain rate. And the pilots have told investigators that they put the system into play, they engaged it fully, they expected it to keep the plane's speed at a certain level, and they essentially never monitored the speed as carefully as they should have on the approach. And the differences between the systems in Airbus and Boeing planes is significant. And the most important difference is that the throttles themselves in a Boeing aircraft move, they adjust as the auto throttle adjusts the speed. They actually move, and the pilot with his hands on the her hands on the throttles can feel those adjustments. In an Airbus aircraft, that doesn't happen. So in this accident, what you had was a plane descending, and the pilot's hands presumably were on the throttles. They weren't moving at all, but he was used to that because he used to fly an Airbus plane. So the question is, was he just reverting to his old training issues and methods?
Okay, so Andy, tell us, what are the next steps in the investigation?
Of course, they opened the runway, and they're going to cut up the plane. Now we're going to have a long slog of several months of looking through all of the data, going through some more interviews, and really trying to examine and determine very specifically what happened and what these pilots were thinking and what they were doing. But at this point, I would say the National Transportation Safety Board has made it pretty clear that there are no mechanical issues, there are no air traffic control issues, there's nothing wrong with the plane, and they really are focused on what the pilots did, whether they inadvertently turned something off and didn't realize it, or some other issue may have prevented them from properly controlling this aircraft, which got very slow as it was coming in.
Okay, Andy Pasztor, we know you will be on that story as we get those developments. Thanks so much.
My pleasure.